and friends and taking those last-minute photographs and just, exchanging thoughts before we board the buses on the beginning of our journey to the Soviet Union.
Everybody seemed to be really excited about their trip, and all of our parents and friends were just maybe a little bit nervous about us going to such a faraway place. This is our plane from Stockholm to Leningrad. It's Aeroflot, which is the Soviet national airline. They claim to have the largest airline in the world, and this is true. Unfortunately, the accommodations while on board the plane wasn't as good as ones from the United States.
One thing that I found particularly terrible on the flight was a beverage that they served us, and that was mango juice imported from Cuba. I have never tasted anything this awful in my entire life. It was incredibly terrible. We took this picture of the Aeroflot airplane in the Stockholm airport because in the Soviet Union you're not allowed to take any pictures of airports or train stations, railroad bridges, or obviously military bases.
This is the Communist Central Committee office in the Kremlin. This is where the Politburo meets, and it's where all of the basic offices of the Soviet Union are.
Okay, you can see in this slide that there's lots of space where people could, just walk around, but the tourists are pretty much kept on the sidewalk, and, if you step off, there's guards all over the place. You can see one there, and they kind of shoo you back up on the sidewalk.
This is the Palace of Congresses. In the lower part of it, they have this auditorium where we saw this ballet. It was called Basil. It wasn't one of the best ballets I've ever seen, but it was enjoyable that night.
Well, one thing about this, the music hall that we were in, if you compare it to Elliott Hall of Music is like very low. I mean, this place is incredible. It's wired for sound like you've never seen before. It's a beautiful, beautiful music hall.
Apparently, there are speakers every other seat, and one thing about this building, it's one of the newer buildings within the Kremlin, and apparently it was built so that it wouldn't overpower the older buildings, so most of it is underground. What you see up top really isn't the main part of it.
Yeah, they didn't want to ruin the skyline. They wanted you to still be able to see the cathedrals and other buildings of the Kremlin without having some new, obnoxious structure in the view.
You've probably seen the inside of this building before on television if you've ever seen meetings of the Politburo. That is the same place that we saw the ballet.
Okay, this is the Tsar's cannon. It's never been fired before. If you see those cannonballs there, the cannon was not actually designed to use cannonballs. It was designed to be a shrapnel-firing weapon, and those cannonballs were just made later for a kind of tourist attraction. The cannonballs actually weigh several tons apiece.
There's a legend or a rumor that the Russians built this cannon during a war, and their adversary, when they saw the huge cannon, the war was over without even one shot being fired. This is supposed to be one of the heaviest cannons in the world, if not the heaviest. This is the largest bell in the world. Something about the Russians, what they do often is they like to build big things and heavy things. And this is the largest and heaviest bell in the world.
Well, that's one of the things that I noticed while we were over there. Everything that they showed you or told you, it was either the largest, the second largest, or one of the largest in the world. So, I mean, they take pride in being number one.
This bell was so heavy that they couldn't actually hang it from any place, so they built it and they left it there.
The chunk you see that has fallen off there, just to give you some idea of the immense weight of this bell, that chunk weighs several tons, and it cracked off in the cooling process after casting. It cracked, and then that's when that chunk came off.
This is our guide, Misha. I think this tour that we had with Misha, who was an in-tourist guide, and obviously people who work for in-tourists have to be members of the Communist Party and in very good standing with them. But Misha had just started out really in being a tour guide, and he said that this was his best group. We liked talking to him about the United States, weather in the United States, food in the United States, American money, American standard of living, how large our houses are in comparison to Russian houses, differences in food. He was so interested in learning all about our culture.
Yeah, Mike and I had a kind of a funny conversation with him at one point in time when we were talking to him about the United States, and he was asking us questions, and he started asking us about, all the health food nuts that we have, people that really get into health food. And we said, yeah, there's all kinds of these people that won't eat any food with preservatives in it. And he kind of, he looked there and he's kind of confused for a minute. He had this confused look in his eye, and then he suddenly, his eyes changed light and he started to chuckle a little bit, and then we said, what's going on? And he said that in the Soviet Union, preservative is another word for condom, and so then Mike and I were also laughing.
We got him to stop smoking also during our trip. He had taken his last cigarette during our tour. We were happy about that.
These are just the towers that are on top of one of the cathedrals inside of the Kremlin, and you can just see the ornate artwork on the top of them, and those spheres, or those onion-shaped domes at the top, are covered in gold leaf, which they take, I think, about a square centimeter.
Cubic centimeter.
Is it a cubic centimeter?
Yeah, and they pound it out into a square meter.
Okay, they take a cubic centimeter. This is just another one of the cathedrals at the Kremlin, and you can see on those three arch shapes on the front there are some really ornate paintings. And this is just a close-up of one of those paintings. This is just a close-up of one of those onion-shaped domes, and you can see how ornate the detail gets with the little like lace-type stuff around the bottom of the onion dome, which is also all covered in gold leaf.
The Soviet Union now doesn't have any religion in it. They discourage religion. And I found it interesting that they have tremendous amount of upkeep on all of these domes and buildings and churches that they have. They take very good care of it and are careful to show it off to all the tourists that come there. Apparently they spend a lot of money in upkeep, and we saw people on the roofs of these cathedrals shoveling snow and ice off of them in order to keep them nice looking. Yeah, the Soviet Union is an atheist country, and that's one of the amusing things is that at least every day we saw one cathedral, and we toured, 5 or 6 cathedrals altogether. This is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. I think it was probably one of my favorite things that I took a picture of during the trip. This flame that you see is an eternal flame. It never goes out. And all of the army brass and other stuff that you see behind it is all made out of metal. It commemorates all the people who died in any war that the Soviet Union was involved in after the revolution. Yeah, its main stress, though, is to commemorate the soldiers that died in World War II, or the Great Patriotic War, where, there were so many Soviet casualties. People came and they laid flowers in front of it. I don't think you can see it in the picture. Oh, you can. You can see flowers in the picture, and people come and lay these flowers every day, no matter how cold it is. And it's one of the most beautiful monuments there is in the Soviet Union. It's right next to the Kremlin. Red Square. And to the right of the picture is the wall of the Kremlin. And then to the left of center, the structure that you see that has like the columns up at the top, that is Lenin's tomb, and that columned area is the reviewing stand where all the high-ranking Soviet officials will stand and watch the May Day parade of all the Soviet missiles and soldiers that parade through Red Square. You can also see the towers of the Kremlin. The one on the far end of the Kremlin, in the middle of the picture, is the main gate of the Kremlin. And apparently, everyone who had entered into this gate was supposed to walk through it. And when Napoleon, when he had captured this part of Russia, he said, "No way, I'm going to ride through it." This is just a legend. And apparently, while he was going through the gate, a wind came and blew off his hat, and he had to get off his horse and walk the rest of the way through the gate. One of the in-tourist guides told me about that. And also, if you look on the top of that tower, there's a star that was added right after the revolution.
One of the other interesting things about Red Square is when you see the May Day parade with all those Soviet soldiers, marching in perfect order and everything, and then when you get there and you walk around on Red Square, there's a bunch of lines painted on it, and those are so everybody gets lined up correctly and knows where to go.
You feel really small when you're in Red Square. It's just an amazing place to be. Right here you see GUM department store on the left side when you're facing St. Basil's Cathedral.
This is the largest department store in the world. It's just filled with hundreds and hundreds of small shops. It's not like a department store or a mall. You could compare it to a mall in the United States, except there's no big department stores like JCPenney's or anything. It's just the small shops that deal in one thing, like hats or coats, or one shop had drafting supplies in it. But as we noticed while we were walking through it, not many people were really buying many things. It seemed like everything in there was kind of high-priced, even by, for Soviet citizens.
People go in there and they get in line and they just get in line for no matter what it is. If there's a long line someplace, Soviets generally just get in it and not knowing what they're going to buy, and when they get up to the front of the line, they buy it. It doesn't matter how it fits or if it's the right color or anything. They buy it and they figure if they don't want it later, they can sell it, but it must have been a good deal.
Yeah, people in Soviet families, they have all the sizes of their immediate family memorized, as well as, some more distant relatives like, cousins, aunts, and uncles and stuff. So if they get in a line and there's something really good, they'll just start to buy. They know the sizes and they'll buy it for other people. And like all the women, they carry around, a small fold-up bag, and a lot of the men carry around some type of, like, an extra briefcase or something, so that, if they see something, they can just get in a line and buy it, and they'll have a way to carry it home.
This particular department store really isn't good for Western buyers. It's geared definitely to the Russians. Most of the things that you see in there are not as good quality as you'd see in the United States. Anything that's really for comfort or something that you really wouldn't have to have in order to live, like fur-lined gloves or a fur hat, are extraordinarily expensive in the Soviet Union.
This is Lenin's tomb, and you can see that reflection off the marble. That is the reflection of GUM department store. That is how shiny the marble actually is. And these are just the two Soviet guards that the tomb is guarded day and night, year-round.
This is also, Lenin's tomb is in Red Square also, and if you notice from the previous picture that it really isn't colored red. The reason for that is that red in Russian has another meaning. It also means beautiful, and this is considered to be one of the most beautiful spots in all of Russia.
Okay, this is probably the single most beautiful thing.
Yeah,
kind of
this is something that I always wanted to see. Ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to go to Russia to see St. Basil's Cathedral.
This is the most beautiful thing in Moscow, and in fact, if you're going to the Soviet Union, the only place I would not spend more than like a day in Moscow, because the only thing you want to see is Red Square. You want to see the Kremlin, Red Square, and St. Basil's Cathedral.
It looks so much larger on the outside than it is from the inside.
Yeah, this cathedral was designed. Was it designed by Peter the Great?
Yeah, it was actually by Ivan the Terrible.
Okay.
And apparently he had these people who designed it blinded after they made the designs, so that they couldn't reproduce it afterwards.
Yet, Ivan the Terrible, who had this built, he didn't have it built actually to be really an active church or functional on the inside. He built it for the people to see. That's why it is so incredibly beautiful on the outside. And then the inside, it's really nothing that special.
The inside of this church, while we were there in the wintertime, and apparently they had services there in the wintertime, it's extremely cold.
In fact, I don't think it's heated at all on the inside.
No, it's not heated. And one thing that one of the in-tourist guides told us is that back when when the Russians practiced religion, it was their faith that kept them warm.
The Moscow convent. This is where the czars and rulers of Russia, like if they got tired of one of their wives or they were having problems with one of their sisters or something, they would send them to the Moscow convent because, you know, it was a convenient way to get rid of them.
Moscow University. When I first looked at this place, I was completely in awe of how large it is. You can see at the top of it is a sign for the Soviet Union. I think it's a star. And they have all these offices, and this is just one huge building in this large university.
But actually, as you say, this building is large, but I think this building is pretty much the university. I think like all the classes are in this building and like all the people stay in this building. I think the enrollment is only somewhere around 6,000 perhaps.
Right.
Okay, this is a view off a hillside very near to Moscow University. And the stadium you see is it the Lenin Stadium?
It's the Olympic Stadium.
It's where the 1980 Olympics were held. And you can see directly in front of the stadium is the Moscow River, and then just Moscow in general in the background.
Yeah, you can see all of Moscow from this picture, or from this site. Just in back of us is the picture that you saw before. That's how close it is. This is one of the most awesome sites in all of Moscow. You can really see everything from it. You can even see the Kremlin way in the background. One of the things that we did was we went to a hotel to meet with Soviet youth, and we got along with them pretty well. I think we got along with the youth that we met in Leningrad at the Youth Palace better. But at this hotel, one thing that we did was we had dancing, and that's what this picture shows.
The youth we met here were actually university students, you know, similar to like Purdue students or IU students, like freshman and sophomore that we were talking to. So they were really a little bit older than the majority of us. And the thing we did was they planned like some games for us. Each group, the Americans taught the Soviets a dance, and the Soviets taught the Americans a dance. So it was rather interesting and also quite amusing.
This is one of the Russian Orthodox churches that is still that's still working. It's in a place called Zagorsk, which is northeast of Moscow. It's really strange because they said that they would close it down if they couldn't have tourists come and see it. And also, you know, this is supposed to be an atheist country, and they're really big on everybody viewing their icons and religious artifacts that you find in these places. This is one of the largest monasteries, or the largest monastery in all the Soviet Union.
We went inside of this church actually, and there were like many people worshiping in there.
Mostly old people.
Yeah, in fact, I didn't see any young people except like a baby or a young child that was being looked after by a grandmother or something.
And the thing is, you get in there and everybody's singing the service, and they're all in perfect harmony together. And
yeah, you feel really out of place. You kind of feel like you're intruding.
You do feel like you're intruding. I'm not sure. You see all the light streaming through the windows, and you almost feel like converting to Russian Orthodox.
But it's really beautiful to witness them acting out their service, though. It's just incredibly beautiful. These are typical tourists. You can see two people taking pictures, one person staring up at something, one person pointing at somebody else, and then there's somebody in the background that's just totally spaced out.
One thing that the Russian kids can do is they can point out an American from a mile away, and the first thing they'll do is come up to them and ask them for chewing gum.
And or the other thing that a lot of Russian, like teenagers or older, or young adults would ask for is they would want to trade clothing with you. You know, trade for your shoes, or they want jeans and brand name tennis shoes.
They come up to you with these bills, just like mounds of money, and they start counting them in front of you and saying, "Sport shoes?" jeans, and you can't take the money because the Russians count your money when you get in there. But you know, this is just what the Russians' point of view of an American is. You know, always having a camera, always taking pictures, walking around in their jeans and tennis shoes.
Yeah, but a large number of our group traded like jeans and brand name tennis shoes for like items of Soviet military clothing, Soviet flags, lacquer boxes, you know, things like that.
I was able to trade personally a fur hat that was supposedly worth about $50 in American money.
I traded for a Soviet flag, a military belt, and a number of military pins.
And they really didn't give us much trouble leaving the Soviet. You're not supposed to trade in the Soviet Union because it really does not do good things for their economy. But only a couple of us had trouble leaving with the items that we traded for. This is really an thought-inspiring statue. This is in Moscow near the economic achievements.
The statue that you see there in the foreground, it's a man and a woman. And the man is holding up a hammer and the woman is holding up a sickle. And this is to represent the common bond of the working class in the Soviet Union.
When you look at this statue close up, you get the feeling, even if you're, you know, a strong capitalist, that, hey, you know, they got something going here, communism, with the man and his hammer and the woman doing the work with their sickle, and we all work together. They have this figure on coins and on paintings. It's something that you see a lot in the Soviet Union. One thing that the Soviet Union is really proud of is the fact that they were the first ones to go into space. And this is a monument that portrays that. It's made of titanium, and it's absolutely huge.
Yeah, it's a monument to all of the cosmonauts in the Soviet Union. And near this monument is a hotel named the Hotel Cosmos,
right,
which is also to commemorate the Soviet cosmonauts.
It's supposed to be one of the most comfortable hotels in all of Moscow.
Here we have the Soviet subway.
It's really a sight to see.
The subways were actually cleaner than the bathrooms. I mean, you go into like the New York subway or the Chicago L, and you see all kinds of, you know, graffiti and painting, trash and litter. You see none of that here.
The Soviets wouldn't dare ever do anything to their subway system.
They're actually beautiful. There's like, in this one, I don't know whether you can really see it, but there's some ornate like carvings, stone carvings in the ceiling. This is in the lower level of one of the other subways, which there's a series of mosaics in the ceiling to portray or to commemorate the Soviet Air Force, isn't it? Or the Soviet military? Okay. In the lower level of another subway is a series of mosaics in the ceilings to commemorate the Soviet military. And this particular mosaic commemorates the Air Force.
While we went from Moscow to Leningrad, we had to take a train, and each of us was put into a sleeping compartment called a couchette. What you see is, this is the inside of the couchette.
The room was approximately 4 by 6. The room was approximately 5 feet by 6 feet, and there were 4 people in each room, plus all of their luggage.
This is me sitting on the left, or actually sleeping on the left, after a tired day. This is also late at night, I believe.
Our hotel in Leningrad, seen here, was centered in, what do I want to say?
Our hotel in Leningrad was only a few minutes. It was only a few minutes walk from the train station.
It was about 3 blocks, and it was really conveniently located because it was also about a block from one of the main metro stations.
We actually weren't supposed to stay here. They had changed our hotel twice before they put us in this particular hotel. It was called the Oktoberskaya Hotel, and one thing that we liked about it is that for a group of students, it was really comfortable.
One of the things that I found interesting was that, like in the United States, when a group goes to a hotel, they usually put the group like all in the same place on a floor. Like they'll use like part of a floor for the hotel will be that group. In the Soviet hotels, they spread us out all over the place. So, and in this hotel was very large, so you'd had to, you know, if you wanted to go see somebody, you had to wander around for a while.
It took us about 15 minutes to get to other people's rooms.
And one of the things in Soviet hotels is that you don't keep your key. When you leave your room, you go to, there's like floor desks, and there's ladies man these desks, you know, all hours of the day and night. And you give her your key when you leave, and she gives you a pass card. And this pass card is what gets you into the hotel, so you have to have it with you at all the times. And then when you go back up to your floor, you give it to your desk lady, and she will hand you your key. One of the things that my roommates and I like to do is we would like brown nose our floor lady. We would like, you know, give her packages of chewing gum and some American flag pins, and we offered her some American cigarettes and stuff.
We developed a really good rapport with them. They would always tell us beforehand who was in the room, and you know, if there was anyone in the room, and they would always say thank you, and we would always say thank you, and they would always say pожалуйста, and we had a really good time with them, and
we would come walking down the hall toward the desk, and the lady would get the key out and have it ready for us when we got there.
And the first thing out of our mouths would be spasiba, and they would always say pожалуйста with this huge smile on their faces. One thing that the Soviets will not forget, and their government won't let them forget, is the toll that World War II had on their country, especially Leningrad. One of the more somber things that we visited while in Leningrad was something that is both functional and commemorates all of this destruction. What you see here is a cemetery that contains 470,000 bodies, all of which who were killed in World War II by the Nazis.
Yeah, all of these people died in the siege of Leningrad when the Nazis were bombing Leningrad. But most of the people died from starvation. And these 470,000 people are buried in mass graves. And in the foreground is an eternal flame.
This happens to be the first eternal flame that in Russia, that was made in Russia.
And there are flower stands right outside of the cemetery. And like many of the Soviet citizens that go to this cemetery buy flowers and put them right there by the eternal flame. We only saw one of these on our entire trip.
And it's a gas station. All of the cars that you see are like any other car in the Soviet Union. They're all exactly the same in terms of their shape, and most of them aren't as colorful as these.
The price of gasoline was exorbitant. I think it cost around 3 rubles, which is about $4 a gallon. In the distance, you see Peter and Paul Fortress.
This tower is covered with gold. Here's the same tower, part of the fortress.
That's the cathedral in Peter and Paul Fortress, and the wall is the wall that surrounds the fortress. And we have an interesting picture of some things that were leaning up against the wall later on. These are the Walrus, members of the Walrus Club. It's a group of fanatical Russians that go out in the middle of winter and sunbathe against the wall at Peter and Paul Fortress. I mean, it's how cold was it? It was around 30 to 40 degrees while we were there, but
the sun was shining that day, and they'll go out almost any day because they call themselves year-round sunbathers, and every day, almost during the year, you have people sitting there catching some rays.
There's also people that actually go swimming in the icy waters of the river. If you look very closely at this man's hat, you can see a Purdue button on it. We gave him this while we were there, and he was just ecstatic to get it. You know, he's got this big smile on his face. He was really happy. This is one of our sane chaperones. He saw this place where I guess the Walrus Club goes swimming from time to time, and he decided that, you know, he wanted to check it out and see what the temperature of the water was. So he took off his boot and dipped his foot in the water just to see what the temperature was, and all the time he was hoping that he wouldn't slide in.
This actually happens to be Mr. Troyer, our economics expert at school. He's one of the more crazy members of the group that we had.
This is a view. During the summer, this area that you see here at the Summer Palace is full of hundreds of fountains. All these fountains are run, none of them are run by mechanical pumps. It's all by water pressure. They gather the water about 50 miles away in a cistern, and then it comes down through sluices, and the gravity is what causes all the fountains to run, and they can run them for about 10 hours before they have to shut the sluices off and fill the cistern back up.
They have postcards of the fountains while they're going, and it's a magnificent sight. You really can't get the full idea of what it looks like during the wintertime.
That's one of the things that I would like to do, would be to go back to Leningrad during the spring or summer months when the fountains were operating. And we weren't allowed to take any pictures here inside the Summer Palace, so we'll try and describe it to you a little bit. It's incredibly beautiful. What you can see here, this is just one of the roof of one of the wings. You know, that's just a small part of it, and you can see how ornate the outside is. I mean, and the inside is, 10 times as ornate. It's just incredible. There's silk wallpaper in some of the rooms, and a lot of the floors have intricately connected patterns.
A lot of the banisters and things are covered with gold leaf. They don't let you touch any of the gold leaf while you're in there, but it really is something beautiful to see. The staircase as you're going up is just an incredible sight. How much money they could have possibly poured into this place is amazing.
And all of this has been restored after World War II, because during the war they took as much of the artifacts and artwork out of the palaces and all their museum type places, and took it out into Siberia and hid it so that it wouldn't be destroyed, because this entire place was bombed out during World War II.
It was basically leveled to the ground.
The only thing left were the walls. There were no ceilings, no floors, nothing. And they've completely restored the interior of a great portion of the palace, and it's just unbelievable to think that that could actually be done after you see the pictures of the devastation.
In some of the rooms, they have pictures of what it looked like before they had restored it, and it's really hard to believe, comparing what it looks like now, that it could have actually been restored to how it is now.
Well, some of the paintings that were painted on the ceilings were like 20 feet by 30 feet. They were repainted from just like postcard-sized sketches of what the painting was like.
One of the most beautiful cathedrals in all of Russia, and the most ornate, is St. Isaac's, which is shown here. Even looking at the outside, you get an idea of how much work was put into building it, with its dome and its columns. This was actually shielded during the war, but it was still hit by many bombs.
Here you can see some of the damage from artillery shells to the columns outside.
This is an example of how ornate the interior was. No money was spared at all in decorating this place that was built in the 1800s. It was only functional as a church for a short time, up until the Revolution.
Well, this picture, it also gives you some idea of the size comparison. You can see how small the people are in relationship to how high the ceiling is.
When you're in there, you don't really know what to look at. Everything is just packed together, and it's also incredible.
A lot of these little pictures on the wall are like just icons to the Soviet religions, or Soviet religion.
As I was saying, this was only functional as a church for a short time. After the Revolution, they decided that it should be a museum instead, to show the Soviet artwork instead. There's a huge amount of paintings in it, as well as painting that's on the plaster itself.
Yeah, and there's a lot of gold leaf. Many, many things are covered by gold leaf.
The whole dome is covered in gold leaf.
There's also a huge stained glass window. It goes from about the floor to the ceiling. So from that earlier picture, you can get some idea of how large this actually is.
This is interesting because stained glass windows are not very common in Russia. They're not typical to Russian Orthodox churches. And one reason that this may be is that St. Petersburg, which is what it was at the time that it was built, was its European capital. So therefore, it was more Western than most other areas of Russia at the time. So they were able to copy somewhat of the other Western European areas.
Here are typical West Lafayette students after the bus has gone for more than 15 minutes. On the average, people didn't sleep much at night. They were just up socializing and whatnot, talking about different things. So after a while on the bus, everybody would just kind of crash.
With our in-tourist guide talking to us about the Neva River and Mr. Nevsky and all of these things having to do with Leningrad, I thought it was maybe just slightly rude of us to all fall asleep at the same time, but she didn't seem to care. She kept on going on and on and on anyway.
One of the things we did while we were in Leningrad was to go to the U.S. Consulate. We talked to Marines here, like this person. Well, all the Marines there had nicknames. One of them was called the Walking Boss because he had been in Leningrad for, I think, 13 or 14 months, and he had never ridden the metro. This person, the Marine pictured in the center here, was called the Talking Boss because he would talk about anything for just hours on end, you know. You could get him going on something and he would just talk and talk and talk. So we asked him a lot of questions, you know, like we asked him what kind of security they had, what kind of weapons they carried, and on the security thing we said, you know, like what about Soviet bugs and stuff, and he said that they just had a couple of secure rooms that they would police for bugs like once or twice a month, and so they would just hold all their important conversations in there where they didn't have to worry about it because these rooms were like soundproof. You know, we asked him like what if they did anything, like if they knew any Soviet citizens or anything, and they said no, they really didn't associate with Soviet citizens because, you know, the only ones that would associate with them were ones that the government wanted to, and they'd be like KGB agents or someone that would be trying to gain information from them, so they just avoided, you know, communicating or becoming friends with any of the Soviets because the government could hold, you know, if they became friends with the Soviet citizen that wasn't working for the government,